Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for stopping by our channel, where we share real-life stories filled with drama, emotion, and the fight for justice, freedom, and the power of community. Today, you're about to witness a story that might feel all too familiar, when power is abused and ordinary people are forced to rise up. Have you ever dealt with a Karen in real life? Or do you have thoughts about privacy and justice? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your perspective. There are sounds you only need to hear once to never forget. A piercing scream, a splash of water, and then a strange noise, like a mechanical bee choking, ending with a sharp pop. I didn't have to get up to check. I knew exactly what had just happened. Karen, with all her pride and power, had just watched her beloved high-tech toy, her expensive surveillance drone, dive headfirst into her swimming pool like a kamikaze warrior, or a disoriented metal bird. It didn't fall, it surrendered. I sat still on the porch, steam rising from the coffee cup in my hand, my eyes glancing at my laptop screen, as if it were just another ordinary morning. The sound of splashing water still echoed in the background. From beyond the fence, I heard Karen yelling, her voice laced with both shock and outrage, as if the world had just betrayed her with a scratch to her crown. 3 weeks ago, this would have been unimaginable. I was just a new resident, someone who came here hoping to plant a few rows of tomatoes, walk the dog every morning, and live a peaceful life. But in Maple Glen, peace wasn't in the HOA handbook, especially when that handbook was written by Karen. The drone first appeared on a Saturday afternoon. No knock at the door, no greeting, just a persistent buzzing and that chilling sensation of being watched. It hovered above my backyard, its lens pointed straight at my daughter who was reading on the swing. When I looked up, it twitched, as if aware it had been spotted, then slowly drifted back toward the biggest two-story house in the neighborhood, Karen's house. When I showed up at her doorstep that day, Karen wasn't the least bit surprised. She stood there, a giant wine glass in hand, her perfectly made-up face unmoved by my questions. "Just a security check," she said, her voice so sweet it made my skin crawl. "If you've got nothing to hide, there's nothing to worry about." I smiled politely, but inside, something shifted. This wasn't about a drone anymore. This was a message, a show of force. And to Karen, control didn't stop at land. It extended into the skies. I didn't sabotage the drone. I simply showed it the boundaries. And if it chose to cross them, that crash wasn't my fault. It was the natural consequence of a system gone too far. Today, Karen learned a lesson, that not everything can be surveilled, controlled, or fined. Some things are beyond the reach of clipboards and community bylaws, like a father's dignity. And her drone? Now it lies quietly at the bottom of the pool, a silent symbol of arrogance in free fall. I don't know what it is about a bratwurst sizzling on the grill, a cold can of soda, and some soft music playing from a Bluetooth speaker that could make someone feel threatened. But in Maple Glen, anything can be considered a violation, if the rule maker is Karen. That afternoon, the sky was clear, not a single cloud in sight. The first Saturday after weeks of rain. My wife, Sophie, had just finished the salad and roasted potatoes, and I was wrestling with the meat on the grill like some backyard version of Gordon Ramsay. We weren't doing anything outrageous. No big party, no strangers, just the three of us on our newly stained wooden deck. Lena, our daughter, was curled up on the porch swing with her headphones on and a book in her lap. Everything was peaceful, truly peaceful. No politics, no talk about the world. Just a regular family, enjoying a bit of privacy in our own backyard. Then came the buzzing. At first, I thought it was a bee, or maybe a large fly, something you could wave off. But the sound kept getting louder, sharper, like metal slicing through air. When I looked up, it was there. A sleek black quadcopter drone hovering about 20 feet above us. A camera mounted underneath scanned every movement, every expression. I froze. It wasn't just filming the garden. It zoomed directly in on Lena, who had no idea she was being recorded, her eyes still fixed on the page. I yelled, waving my hands, but it didn't budge. I took a few steps forward, grill spatula still in hand, but the drone only gave a slight twitch before drifting away, almost mockingly. I tracked it with my eyes until it disappeared behind the oak trees near the northern fence, the one separating my house from the largest two-story mansion in the neighborhood, Karen's house. Some might say I overreacted. But if you've ever been a parent, if you've ever seen your child being recorded without permission in the private space of your home, you'd understand. This wasn't curiosity. This was intrusion, and it was carried out with expensive technology under the name of community security. That evening, I knocked on Karen's door hoping for an apology, or at the very least, a reasonable explanation. But instead, she stood there, crystal clear white wine in hand, a smile thin and polished like a fresh coat of nail lacquer. "I know," she said casually, "just a routine security flyover. Someone left their trash bin out a little too long." I tried to stay calm. "Your drone hovered outside my daughter's window. It filmed her. That's not security. That's surveillance." Karen sipped her wine, tilted her head as if weighing whether I was worth arguing with. "If you've got nothing to hide, then there's nothing to worry about. Besides, I didn't land it on your property." She shut the door before I could respond. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because, for the first time since we moved here, I realized something. We don't really own this home. Karen, or at least the authority she claimed to represent, had opened the door to a new level of control. And I understood that if I didn't act, there would be a next time, and it would go far beyond a charred sausage. I used to think Karen's first move would be an old-fashioned warning, or at least a knowing glance through the fence that said, "I know who you are." But Karen isn't the type to threaten with words. She retaliates, on paper. That Monday morning, I opened the mailbox and saw a white envelope stamped with the HOA logo. Nothing unusual, unless you just grilled bratwursts in your backyard a few days before. I opened the letter with the same tension you'd feel disarming a psychological bomb, and just as expected, a violation notice. Reason: grill covering material does not conform to aesthetic standards. I stared blankly at the tarp I bought from Home Depot, the kind advertised as weather-friendly and neighborhood-approved. Someone, and I didn't need to guess who, had decided it was a threat to the visual harmony of the community. I chuckled, but the laughter didn't last long. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. Gardening tool visible from street view. I checked. A long-handled shovel leaning gently against the fence, at least 20 feet from the curb. Then came unregistered decorative stones. Wind chime exceeds permitted daytime decibel level. Window trim paint color deviates 2% from approved HOA palette. Each citation was a line in a system Karen had designed, a net that no one could escape if she set her sights on them. Angela, my wife, started pulling the laundry line indoors. Lena shut her blinds whenever she was home. We no longer lived in comfort. We lived in caution. This neighborhood, once marketed as a place where kids can safely play in the yard, had become a stage for a performance of calculated control. Children no longer raced through the yards with water guns. Adults stopped chatting on the sidewalks. Everyone felt like they were being watched by an invisible eye that could fly, record, and most importantly, deliver mail. I began collecting the citations, each sheet, each line of reason, each neatly typed fine like they'd been churned out from a guilt manufacturing factory. Every time we stepped outside, the buzzing returned. Sometimes just a quick pass over the roof. Sometimes it hovered for minutes overhead, like a mechanical bird, patiently waiting for its prey to slip up. Lena cried once when she saw the drone hovering near her bedroom window. Not from fear, but from the helplessness of having her privacy stolen in a way she couldn't even name. I knew Karen was playing a long game. She didn't need to shout or slam tables. She had an 84-page rulebook and the ability to interpret every line in the worst possible way. With her drone in the sky and clipboard in hand, Karen wasn't just a woman obsessed with order. She was addicted to control. But what she didn't know was, I'm not the kind of man you back into a corner and wait for the next hit. I don't react impulsively. I observe. I document. And I strike back, not with words, but with cold precision. The same kind I once used to protect national security and now use to protect my family. Karen just fired the opening shot, and she has no idea. She picked the wrong man to provoke. I'm not a saboteur. I'm not the kind of man who grabs a baseball bat to settle disputes. I believe in structure, in systems, in the idea that everything can be dealt with, subtly, precisely, and without a trace. Just like the intrusion prevention modules I once designed for systems the government never officially acknowledged. And Karen, with her expensive drone hovering overhead like a monument to arrogance, clearly had never met someone like me. That night, after receiving my 5th HOA violation notice in just 10 days, I went into the garage. From an old wooden crate labeled "Do not open unless necessary," I pulled out a set of tools I hadn't touched in years. A weathered frequency scanner still sharp, a compact short-range signal detector, and, my favorite, a low-frequency pulse emitter, powerful enough to scramble control signals without interfering with other electronics in the area. I didn't intend to destroy the drone. I just wanted it to know it was no longer alone in the sky. The next morning, like an annoying routine, the buzzing returned while I was sipping coffee on the porch. I didn't rush. Set my cup down, opened my laptop, and with a single soft click, activated a weak jamming pulse. Just enough to make the drone tremble slightly, then wobble midair before regaining control. It looped frantically and darted back toward Karen's house, faster than usual. I smiled. Karen was surely staring at her controller screen, wondering what the hell had just happened. That evening, the entire neighborhood received an email from her, warning about a possible breach in airborne security systems. She wrote as if Maple Glen had been targeted by an international hacker ring, not a quiet resident pushing back with knowledge. Angela looked at me as I read the email aloud, tilting her head. "What did you do, Jack?" I shrugged. Nothing illegal, just slightly inconvenient for someone who loves to control others. But I knew one warning wouldn't be enough. People like Karen don't understand whispers. They only respond to loss of control. So I began planning something longer term. The next night, I installed a birdhouse, harmless in appearance, even featuring a little wooden bird perched on top. Inside it, I embedded a directional pulse device, one I programmed myself to emit interference within a very narrow field, just enough to scramble drone controls whenever it flew too close to my house. No damage, no destruction, just instability, uselessness, and fear. The drone returned the following morning. Like a wasp that hadn't learned its lesson, it circled once, then hovered exactly where I wanted. I activated the device. It jerked sharply to the left, spiraled, then abruptly retreated, like an animal sensing an invisible fence. Karen wouldn't understand what was happening, but she'd feel it. This sky was no longer hers alone. This wasn't war. It was a whisper of resistance. And as Karen ramped up surveillance, installed more cameras, sent more citations, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't file complaints. I'd make her system unravel itself. A minor interference today, a misaligned maneuver tomorrow. And then, at the right moment, the drone would lose its way. And Karen would lose her power. I knew the signal had hit its target, not the drone, but Karen. Within just 2 days of activating the first jamming device, she had sent out 3 HOA emails. The content wasn't anything new, still the usual buzzwords like community security and residential airspace safety. But the tone had changed. Gone were the gentle reminders and dry regulations. Now it was tense, frantic, and borderline panicked. "We may be facing an organized act of technological sabotage," she wrote. "We cannot rule out the possibility of an external entity breaching the HOA's flight system." She genuinely believed that Maple Glen, a neighborhood where the biggest conflict until now had been about fence paint, was under attack by a hacker cell. But Karen didn't stop at emails. She began installing more cameras, one on the lamppost outside her lawn, one on her front porch, and some strange antenna-like device mounted on top of her silver SUV. I saw a crew arrive at her house Saturday morning wearing uniforms labeled Private Civilian Security. One of them carried a mobile signal booster and a laptop running network surveillance software. Angela peeked through the curtains and sighed, "She's turning this place into a surveillance station." I didn't respond. I was busy taking notes. Karen had no idea who was attacking her, and that's what was driving her off the edge. People like Karen rely on control. When that control is challenged, they don't see it as a natural consequence. They see it as conspiracy. And then they start seeing threats in every corner of their home. Her paranoia quickly began to spread through the neighborhood. Tom, the neighbor next door, stopped by while I was fixing the gutter and whispered, "Hey, have you noticed Karen's drone circling more than usual? I think it caught footage of me shirtless while gardening." I got 2 warnings this week for visual disturbances. I nodded. You're not the only one. As Karen added layer after layer of protection, neighbors started feeling like targets. Each new camera, each warning email, each drone pass. They no longer represented order. They were reminders, constant, hovering reminders, that no one was allowed to let their guard down. Karen was building a kingdom of suspicion. And the sad part? She truly believed she was saving the neighborhood, when in reality, she was dragging it down with invisible fear. I didn't have to do much. Just stay silent. Because Karen, in her self-inflicted spiral of panic, would unravel it all on her own, piece by piece. I once heard an old mentor say, "When a manipulator believes no one dares to challenge them, that's when they're most vulnerable." I kept that phrase in my head for 3 weeks, while tracking the drone's flight schedule, documenting Karen's spiraling paranoia, and most importantly, quietly gathering evidence. I didn't touch the law. I let Karen entangle herself in it. How? With her own arrogance, by filming neighbors without consent, by storing those videos on a poorly encrypted system, by attaching surveillance images to her warning emails, violating multiple state and federal privacy laws. I didn't hack anything. I simply collected what she had carelessly made public. Footage of the drone hovering near children's bedroom windows, flying over elderly couples' backyards, and most damning of all, a clip of Karen seated in her living room, holding the controller, the glow of the screen lighting up her face, while the drone filmed directly into my daughter's bedroom. This month's HOA meeting was held at the community center, once used for Christmas parties, now resembling an unofficial courtroom. Chairs in rows, microphone prepped, and Karen, as always, entered the room like she was hosting a TED Talk. I waited until she began her special announcement about recent acts of sabotage threatening neighborhood security. She launched into a monologue on the necessity of aerial monitoring, warning that certain individuals are deliberately trying to disrupt the system using jamming devices. That's when I stood up. No permission, no courtesy. I walked to the projector, plugged in a USB, and said, "Sorry, but I think everyone should see this," before deciding who's really doing the damage. The screen lit up. First video, the drone hovering near Tom's window as he watered his plants. Second video, a child's birthday party interrupted as the drone swooped overhead. Third video, Karen in her living room, controller in hand, the drone camera feed clearly showing my daughter Lena's bedroom window. The room fell silent. Then, a whisper from the back. A woman murmured, "Oh my God, that's my bedroom window." Another voice spoke up louder. "This isn't security. This is invasion." Karen remained seated, her face unreadable, but her hands were trembling. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice unusually high-pitched. "I was only protecting the community. If anyone feels guilty, maybe it's because they have something to hide." The silence after that was the hardest blow yet. Richard Vance, the HOA board president, usually conflict-averse, finally spoke. "Karen, these actions far exceed the authority of any board member. I propose immediate suspension of your surveillance privileges and an emergency meeting to reevaluate your role." Karen shot to her feet, her chair crashing behind her. "This is a coup. You've all been manipulated." No one replied. No one needed to. She stormed out, heels clicking sharply, the door slamming shut behind her, not like a leader, but like someone finally exposed. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I simply looked at the screen as it dimmed and thought, Karen trapped herself, with the very tool she believed to be her greatest weapon. The only difference? I knew how to make it turn on its master. That morning, I opened the living room window and heard nothing from above. No more buzzing in the sky, no more quiet drone rotors slicing through the air like invisible reminders that someone was always watching. No more pinging emails marked HOA notice, or crisp white papers taped to the front door with cold, polished language. Just warm sunlight filtering through the trees, the scent of freshly cut grass, and the sound of children laughing somewhere beyond the fence. Karen was gone. Not physically. She still lived in the largest 2-story house in the neighborhood, but her presence had vanished. After the HOA meeting, she left in silence, after the drone's poetic plop into her own swimming pool, and after a string of unread final emails. Karen quietly removed herself from the very community she had once tried to control with every word of her rulebook. People still mention her name, sometimes mockingly, sometimes as a cautionary tale. But no one fears her anymore, and that perhaps is the harshest punishment of all. We call the time that followed the first quiet, not because there was no sound, but because every sound had returned to where it belonged. The soft chime of wind bells on front porches, the thump-thump of basketballs on driveways, the strum of the guitar from the girl at House 14, once cited for disrupting designated quiet hours. The HOA bulletin board no longer posted restrictions. Now it held invitations, a community BBQ, weekend gardening groups, Sunday morning yoga in the small park at the southern edge of the neighborhood. People smiled and meant it. They stopped to chat instead of turning away. Tom, my neighbor, renamed his Wi-Fi to Enemy Frequency, a light-hearted reminder that we had once lived under surveillance. Russell began teaching history to the neighborhood kids in his backyard, with a chalkboard and a pitcher of ice water always nearby. And me? I rebuilt the old birdhouse, this time for actual birds. Lena painted a little bluebird on it, wearing a tiny helmet. Angela added the words, "Not everything that flies is watching you." I no longer needed jammers, no more strategic timing to misdirect a machine. All I needed was a deep breath, without worrying about being recorded. One afternoon, while tending to the lavender near the fence, I saw Karen standing on her porch. No clipboard, no phone. Just a woman in a pale gray sweater, looking down our quiet street, as if she no longer recognized the place she once ruled completely. She looked at me, then turned and stepped inside, gently closing the door behind her. I didn't wave, because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need to be spoken. It's the decision to stop fighting someone who has already defeated themselves. And life? It moves forward, and this time, it truly belongs to us. The story of Karen and the drone is not just a petty conflict in a quiet neighborhood. It symbolizes something much larger. When power goes unchecked, it becomes a tool of intrusion. Beneath the guise of community management, Karen used her drone as a weapon to monitor, intimidate, and suffocate the privacy of those around her, all in the name of order. What started as a harmless backyard BBQ escalated into a battle for personal freedom, a quiet but determined resistance against manipulation. And what makes this story stand out is that the protagonist didn't need to shout, didn't resort to violence. He responded with intellect, patience, and integrity. The lessons here aren't just for those who have lived under the rule of HOAs or unreasonable policies. They're for all of us, wherever we are, whatever the circumstance. First, privacy is the foundation of freedom. When we allow someone to invade our personal space, whether through a prying gaze, a hidden camera, or a controlling word, we begin to lose what is most fundamental, the right to be ourselves in peace. Second, silence is not always weakness. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who knows when to wait, when to step back to see the full picture, and when to strike with precision and truth so sharp no one can deny it. Third, community is power. When residents realize they are not alone, when they find the courage to say no, even the most rigid forms of control begin to crack. One voice can be silenced. 100 voices in unity, unstoppable. Finally, this story reminds us, power only exists when people accept it. And sometimes, the best way to restore justice isn't to fight fire with fire, but to let the abuser collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. In a world that's increasingly surveilled, where the line between public and private grows thin, this story is both a warning and a beacon of hope, that fairness can return if someone is brave enough to hold the line. Your voice matters, and it's what helps this community grow stronger every day. If this story resonated with you about the right to live freely, to be respected, and to be protected, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't hesitate to leave a comment below, whether you agree, disagree, or just have something to add. Your feedback helps us spread the message of justice even further. Thank you for being with us and for standing up for what's right.